Welcome to the Angel Apostasy. The Warp is a big place with many diverging timelines for Chaos Gods to dip their sticky unwashed hands in, and this one particular timeline where wee little changes take place with radically diverging consequences. Today, we're discussing the Firstborn, the prototype, the jack of all trades, master of them too, the Emperor's seemingly most trusted and competent son, Lionel Johnson. Here's the Lion in a paragraph. He was sent in a Superman pod to a giant forest planet inhabited by King Arthur's court and giant mutant demon monsters. He raised himself from a baby within that forest and even kills a monster. He eventually meets people, charms, and skills his way to the top of their society until his father, the golden psychic superpowered Emperor, finds him and recruits him for the crusades across the stars. That's it in a nutshell. Here's an equally quick syllabus about how this video is going to go down. We're going to go through and clear up what I think happened in the vague, normal timeline, because in the lore, it's all hearsay, and that he was first found when he looked 15, and that's about it. Then, we're going to go through what I whipped up for the Angel Apostasy, and how it diverges from the timeline. Then we'll see what kind of man he becomes post-divergence. Finally, we'll get into more speculation. While I have a lot written down for all of the Primarchs, it's become more and more obvious that this is a fun, collaborative, community-driven effort, so I'm going to go into some questions I still have not answered for myself about this new Lion. The Primarchs were scattered 792 M30, so I think that's like year 30k. And when he was found by the Great Crusade in the year 846, so he was about 54 years old. The Primarchs mature quickly, then slow way down once they maturate. So, considering Luther, the first man the Primarch met who would later become his BFF and Tism handler, first thought he was barely 15-16 when he saw him. The source says I vaguely remember it from a book or a dream. It doesn't matter, that's what I'm going with. Then I'm going to be putting him anywhere from 6 to 10 years old, roughly, like that's his actual age. This gives him about 40 years to do his King Arthur stuff on Albion or whatever his homeworld is called, and then have his relationship with Luther blossom into a lifelong friendship, and still have Luther be young enough to go through the rejuve pseudo-Astartes process that he goes through when the Emperor gets to him. I imagine, since the Lion is the first Primarch, if there's any disparity between aging speeds, I guess he'd aged the slowest. This is to let him have the most time alone in the forest. So, it's been about 10 years, and around that time, Lionel Johnson has scoped out the forest for a while, and has a decent understanding of the flora and fauna. He knows what he can kill with ease, and he knows what he should generally avoid. Similar to Corvus, he has an innate ability to traverse the wilds like a shadow, but obviously not as extreme. He's more of an apex predator, lurking, than a sort of full-body shadow meld. After a while of practicing his innate skills on larger and larger beasts, he feels he's ready to go for one of the big dogs. And this is one massive pup. I'm picturing either a bear, boar, or a dog, hit with constant ambient warp radiation. This turns this mammal into something at least double the size of our largest grizzly. The warp mutations are probably impartial aspects of all the gods' warp influence, and then some. So it's huge, has spikes, feathers, jutting tusks, some exposed muscle, and maybe a tentacle or two swinging around, lashing at its own skin as much as the forest around it. Let's keep in mind, Lionel Johnson is the prototype Primarch, a little extra great at everything. I imagine he found some metal, whether a pike from a dead soldier, an old rusted broken sword, or a piece of techno-feudal rebar, and through primitive technological methods, turned it into a deadly sharp weapon. At worst, he beat it into a sword like Angron did with that Slaaneshi daemon. Either way, while I think he may have laid elaborate traps around the forest, he made them very versatile for ad hoc use, considering he'd be able to tell this foe would be incredibly erratic. After setting it all up, he'd wait, scoping around to see which of his plans he could implement. Once the hour drew near, I think it would be over quickly. He would strike fast and hard in conjunction with his plans. I imagine the original fight went something like this. The great Chaos Beast is brutalizing its meal of a slightly less mutated bear, ripping bites off, in between smashing it onto trees. All this time, the first Primarch is sitting, watching, until the beast gets particularly distracted, taking an especially large, gorging bite, and that's when the Primarch strikes. He all but flies up a tree, and like Season 1 of Naruto, a vague motion line is bouncing from tree branch to tree branch before he's plummeting down with the blade full force, plunging the edge deep into the muscular neck. He wastes no time, and he jerks deep to the left, trying to sever its spinal column. It's too thick and falls just short, so he's riding now this incredibly pissed off mega beast. Its tail is lashing at him, and he has to dodge it like a show cowboy. Things are looking bleak. However, the first uses the sword like a steering column and yanks it to the right, which leads into the fourth contingency plan. The hand-twisted rope snaps, and he jumps off, pulling the blade out with him. A moment later, a sharpened tree trunk punctures through the beast's mouth like a piston. But still, it writhes around, about to break the trunk into splinters when Phase 2 finally engages, and a rain of 4 equally large trunks pierce its hide from above, pinning it to the ground and killing it instantly. On the ground, quiet now, he observes it for a moment, and when he's finally sure that it's dead, he lets out a shrieking inhuman howl, letting all who hear know that this is his territory. Now, I know what you might be thinking. The lion killed the beast. It's supposed to show that he's martially adept and he's so strong and great that he can kill a giant beast as a baby. Yeah, I get it. I can see a world where he slays the beast solely through martial skill. While potentially capable of that, the lion is more than a mere brute. He is in many ways the best of them, the best of the Primarchs. He's the prototype, and he's where everybody is like S tier in their main thing, while being B, C tier in the rest of their aspects of a Primarch. The lion is A+ tier in everything. And in that, he is the best of them, while simultaneously the most lacking in some je ne sais quoi of humanity. The things that Corvus Corax, Vulcan, Sanguinius, and even Horus has in terms of their connection to people. The lion is lacking. This weird pseudo Asperger's-y thing that he has where he's at his core very bestial. And that sort of rawness, the Emperor has a place for, and it's right by his side. It's his most favored tool. Once again, that's how I like to imagine it happened in the main timeline. Like that's the lore thing when I'm reading about the lion. That's what's happening in my head. But in the Angel Apostasy, the turn happens when he's on the warp beast's back, and the razor tentacles are writhing. Here, one thrashing blade strikes home. Is it a deep slash on his back while he's riding it? Is it down his arm or his leg when he's jumping off? Any answer will suffice, but what really matters is he's not crawling away from the fight. He's limping away with a massive injury. This leaves him with only one choice: to go deeper into the woods, to find a niche for him to heal and grow. And boy, does he ever grow from there on out. All of his skills are bent towards total domination of the forest. He heals before too long, but now he's more wild and determined. He makes a sanctuary for himself in a place where he can more easily guard. Like a partial cave with an exit, he goes to work. He systematically starts eliminating monster after monster, while creating a horror workshop where, like Monster Hunter, he's using many of their parts to craft more and more deadly and elaborate weapons. Without going too crazy into the logistics of it here, let's say he spends the next 10 to 20 years doing just that. He went deep, deep into the forest and just kept expanding the radius of his territory. That is, until he stumbles across man. Now, after a while, the human element of Luther's people notice that, at least some section to the west of them, the amount of monstrous encounters have gone down noticeably, so bands of men travel out further and further, eventually expanding into the First's territory. Now he sees them and understands some deep fundamental kinship with them, but it's unlike his encounter with Luther. Those feelings are now at hard odds with the experience of what he's had to do in order to survive and thrive. The impulse to rip them apart for stepping into his territory is now only abated by a feeling he chooses to not articulate. Feelings are easier than words. And he learns words by watching. When he's not hunting, he observes them constantly. He sees what they say versus what they do, and as he learns what it means to be civilized, he cannot overlook the inherent contradictions in the society and immorality of the people, which leads to suffering. Eventually, he travels to a human settlement, a keep, Mounted atop a beast which has escaped most of the mutation and is garbed in the concealing monster armor of his kills, which only amplifies its terrifying aura. He's an absolutely menacing figure, but speaks out in clear words to the stunned onlooking guards. He commands them to send him a challenger to test their moral courage, or he will tear down their keep stone by stone. Unwisely, they do not, but instead let loose weapons upon him. Whether it's arrows or last fire, it doesn't matter, because he keeps his words and annihilates them all, man, woman, and child. He does it a few more times, until, finally, a knight rides out and accepts his challenge. The first can smell the fear on him. He tests his resolve and holds the blade the moment before he kills him, because the man did not flinch and accepted his fate. Johnson remounts and leaves. He does this continuously, slaughtering countless numbers of peoples, but saving many others. He becomes a wild man myth, a being of the forest, protecting them from the greater horrors of the forest world while culling their populations, of those unwilling to fight or unable to meet his barbaric, seemingly arbitrary standards. By the time the Great Crusade makes their way to Caliban, there is but a fifth of humanity left on the planet. The Confederation of Peoples, their system and ways of being, have been totally broken. Compliance is easy for the Imperium, but acclamation of the Primarch is not. He's everything the Lion was before, but without that pesky veneer of civilization that caged his inner bestial nature. When he sees the Emperor, he challenges him to a duel. It goes on for days across the forest planet. The Emperor then shows him in every possible way that he's the apex predator, and he is in charge. He spends what little time he has left to spare teaching all he can to the Lion about the state of the Imperium and his duties as a Primarch. The Lion dutifully accepts this charge, seeing the galaxy as a grander version of his forest, and the people of the Imperium as just more peoples to be tested in grander keeps and castles, despite what the Emperor said. He's not going to challenge him, but you can't change a tiger's stripes. Now with his brothers, he's a different animal. He can see the potential in each of them. At worst, he views them as another apex predator to take down. At best, he sees them as close as you can to an equal. His relationship with Sanguinius is one of the two special connections he has. Sanguinius was found right before the Lion, and while he integrates immediately, the Lion is a countervailing presence in the Imperium. He sniffs each of his brothers out and has an idea about them, but Sanguinius is a mystery. He wants to pry into his mind, both metaphorically and literally. To the Lion, he's an unknown quantity. There's always a variable there that leaves him curious. So by the time of the apostasy, there's a lot of speculation from his part, which is unusual because the Lion is a being of pure action. He thinks only insofar as he needs to come up with an innate plan and relay those orders to his men. Anyone else going against the Emperor would be foolishness and an excuse for him to test his might. But Sang, the question if he could do the impossible is not strictly no. I think he will waffle back and forth, fight Sang to a near draw, then be an individual agent in the apostasy, striking once strong points, now weakened ripe for predation. Eventually, the Lion would go after Sang again, later on once he's all juiced up on chaos roids, and then get easily manhandled. Then, after some chaos-induced visions, he questions if his memories of the Emperor's strength were real, and he finally turns against him to try his hand at the Emperor's strength again. Another big relation to the Lion is none other than Leman Russ, but I'm going to save that for an upcoming video. It takes a turn that nobody expects, but I think is in character and really weird and fun. Out of all of the Emperor's sons, Lionel Johnson is most accurately described as a tool. In this instance, it's not necessarily the dig it would be otherwise. You may know people like him, people who are at their most content, working a job where they can be near mindlessly in a flow state. People without the desire to ask bigger questions or even see the significance of them. Or who only enjoy the game of life and think the idea of a life unexamined is not worth living as like a lore nerd nonsense. Now, his relationship with his sons, what do you think that would be like? What was the first like before? I'm not super well versed into how they were as a legion before meeting him, what the change was after they all kind of became knights. I knew they were inducted, and he kind of met with them all individually, but I'm wondering how would he feel? Like, how would this primal bestial man, how would they deal with that? People from Terra were, going and seeing the first one, what's going on? And how would he recruit new men? Would he go and set up trials on each planet he conquers and brings into compliance, and then just take boys of that ilk? I mean, how do you keep a constant stream of men flowing? Is it certain planets that he feels meet a certain bar, and then he just sets them up as recruitment worlds and marks them as his territory? Is it every planet that he goes to is then marked as his territory, and then he's, if any other legion goes there, thems are fighting words, and then he gets an excuse to smack them down? That seems like it'd be kind of neat. What do you think? And as an aside, I know there's a lot of engagement bait, what do you think about blah, 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 blah. I'm legitimately curious. I think these are really fun. They're fun, interactive ideas. I don't know a lot of people who are into 40k in real life, into other nerdy stuff like magic and all that nonsense, but this is really the main engagement that I get for 40k and these ideas, so please let me know, because it spurs me on. It gives me that fuel, that fire. Outside of that, what do you think his relationship would be with his brothers? Besides Russ. Russ is going to be a special case, but for the ones that I've revealed so far, I think we can kind of get into them a little bit more as we kind of round up the apostasy. We have some cool people coming up. Magnus is going to be neat. I'm a little spoiler. He is very intertwined with Jagatai Khan, and they get into weird directions that they don't go into in the main continuity. I think they both have more agency in weird ways than they otherwise did, which is very ironic for Jagatai Khan, considering he is the I want self-agency guy. If you like my 40k writing and want to see more, I host them for free on my Substack, and archive of my own. Links in the description. If you want to read some original stories by me, or just want to support me in this channel, you can by subscribing to my Substack. I have original sci-fi and fantasy stories I'm proud of, more of which are coming. I also have two other channels, CO's Shorts, which contain any new short meme content I used to do on this channel, and CO's Stories, a YouTube channel I have to host all my long-form audiobook-like content. Thank you for watching, I really do appreciate it. Until our next adventure, CO.